Kira, and today I'm coming at you with a reading vlog. As you can tell, I'm sitting down as if I'm filming a proper sit-down video. So today's reading vlog is going to be a slightly different one to normal, and that is just because rather than choosing the books that I'm going to be reading myself, as you can probably tell from the title of the video, the books that I'm going to be reading in this reading vlog have been picked by Em from alittlewriterem, because we thought it would be really fun to do a video where we each pick each other's TBR, just because we have definitely got some similar reading styles and we like some similar books, but then in other ways we both definitely read different types of books, so we thought it would be really fun to pick books for each other and see what we think of them. So for this video I've picked out 3 books for Em, and I will link her reading vlog down below where you can see her reaction to the TBR I've picked for her, as well as all of her thoughts on the books as she's reading them. And then she's picked out 3 books for me as well, and honestly I'm a little bit nervous just because we were talking about it a couple of days ago and she was trying to guess some of the books I might have picked for her, but she said she would be very impressed, literally so impressed that she would give me £1 million if I could guess any of the books that she picked for me, because she said she didn't think that she'd ever spoken about them with me before. So I literally have zero idea what I'm going to be reading this week, but I'm really looking forward to it. So before I get started on the normal reading vlog and actually get down to my thoughts on the books, I obviously need to find out which books I'm going to be reading. So Em has sent me a video with the TBR that she's picked out for me, and I'm just going to watch that now and react to it for you.
Hey Kira, I am so excited to recommend your TBR for you, so here we go. I tried to recommend these based on things I knew about what you'd already read, what you enjoyed, and also your Goodreads TBR and Read Shelf, so I hope that those were up to date. The first one that I picked for you, I picked on the basis that I recommend The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary to you, and you really enjoyed it. So the first book that I'm going to recommend to you, I picked basis on the fact that you liked it issue-based contemporary with endearing characters and an exciting premise. So the first one is The One We Fell in Love With by Paige Toon. I'll put a picture there because I don't have the physical copy with me, but I'll be able to get it by the time we do the book swap. And this one is about 3 sisters who are really close, but they all have a connection to the same boy who lives next door to them. I'm not going to give you any more than that because that is the exciting premise, and I didn't know any more than that when I read it, and I loved it. The characters were endearing, I cried, I laughed, and it was just a really great contemporary romance. So that's the first one, and I feel like that's very true to my book taste, so I'm sure you were expecting a romance on there.
Okay, I'm really looking forward to this one. This one definitely sounds like it's up my street. Sounds like there's going to be a really intriguing sort of relationship between these main characters that you're going to get to know. Then there's also going to be some major drama in there as well, and there's a bit of romance, and those are the books of Em's reading taste. As she's saying, this is definitely the sort of book that I would expect her to like, and these are the kind of only books that she's recommended me previously. I've read Taylor Jenkins Reid, Beth O'Leary, Holly Bourne on the basis of Em's recommendations, and they've all seemed to fit into this sort of genre, and I've really enjoyed all of those books and authors, so I'm hoping I'll love this one, because if it's anything like the other ones Em's recommended, I'm sure I'll really enjoy this one.
And then the second book that I'm going to pick for you, I picked on the basis that you liked Misery by Stephen King. I haven't read that or any Stephen King, however I know that's a thriller mystery, so I wanted to pick you a thriller mystery. I went for one that I read last year before I started BookTube. Haven't seen it really mentioned anywhere, and it is The Image of You by Adele Parks. This is one about 2 sisters called Anna and Zoe, and they're very close, but Anna is very mild and romantic, and Zoe is very dangerous and daring. And Anna gets into a relationship with a man called Nick, and Zoe doesn't trust him, and it's about him interacting with these 2 sisters, and Zoe doesn't like him at all and Anna really does, and it's a thriller about this. I'm not going to tell you any more than that, but I gasped at some of the plot twists here. It literally was a wild ride, and I feel like Misery sounded like a bit of a roller coaster and a wild ride, so that's why I picked this one, and I think that you'll really enjoy it. I hope you'll really enjoy it.
Okay, that definitely sounds interesting. I love a thriller as long as it has lots of plot twists and things, and the fact that Em says that she's gasped at this, at some of the plot twists, definitely sounds like it's going to fit into that category. Sounds really interesting, and yes, you're right, Misery was a massive roller coaster, and that's part of the reason why I enjoyed it so much, because there wasn't a moment in that book where you could just relax, because there was always something happening and you were just so tense throughout. So if this book manages to do that as well, I'll be very impressed, and I'm really looking forward to reading it.
And then the final recommendation I have for you, I picked on the basis that a lot of your videos that I've watched have a really eloquent, thought-provoking take on books, so I wanted to pick a book that you could have a really thought-provoking discussion on. And so I picked The Immortalists by Chloe Benjamin, which is very hyped on BookTube. I saw it because Zoe really recommended it, and I gave it 5 stars, really enjoyed it. It is about about 4 children that go to a psychic when they're younger, and the psychic tells them each the day that they're going to die, and so it's how they live their life based on that information, which is such an exciting premise for a book. Like, what would you do if you knew the day you were going to die? And so the book is split into 4 parts, one for each of the siblings, and how their life kind of pans out, and whether the fact that they had this information about the day they were going to die influenced their life decisions, or whether their life would have panned out that way anyway. And it's just such a thought-provoking book, and it is really emotional. So I hope that you will enjoy like the fact that this book opens up a lot of discussion points, and that's why I picked that one. I tried to pick these based on things I knew about you and your reading taste, so I hope I've done well. I hope you enjoy these books, and I cannot wait to see your video.
Oh my god, so The Immortalist is, of the 3 books that she's picked me, the only one that I've actually ever heard of. As she said, the other 2 were ones that definitely haven't really been talked about on BookTube as much, whereas The Immortalist definitely has. But I'm really looking forward to getting into that one because that sounds super interesting. I love multi-perspective, like multi-narrative style books, and this one has different chapters or sections for each of the 4 siblings, and to me that concept of how you change the way that you live based on knowing when you die is really interesting. I'm sure a lot of you will have heard of what is it? They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera, which is a book that I picked up purely based on that concept, and I didn't necessarily love the way that it played out in that one, but I did love the concept, so I'm hoping that this book will do that concept but in an even better way, and given the amount of hype it's had on BookTube and the amount of good reviews it's got, I'm sure that it will. So yeah, absolutely really excited for that one, especially because if Em and also Zoe have really liked it. I really enjoyed both of their contents and really respect both of their opinions on books, so hopefully I'll definitely enjoy that one. And I'm really looking forward to getting into the other 2, particularly because I haven't really got much of an opinion on them, and I just think sometimes it can be really interesting to go into books without too much of a preconceived idea about what it is that you're getting into, so I'm really looking forward to going into those books with an open mind and just seeing what I think of them. Alright guys, so it's now a little while later. I'm now heading out into town. I'm first meeting up with Em, and I'm going to get the books that she's recommended for me, as well as picking up the one book that she doesn't have from Waterstones. I'm fingers crossed that they actually have it in stock, but if not I'll have to get it on Amazon. And then I'm also meeting another one of my friends, and then when I get back from all of my meetings in town, I will be getting started on some reading. So I've just gotten back from town. It was actually so much fun. I obviously met up with Em, and then after that I met up with my friend Beth, and I ended up drinking so much tea, and I also had some vegan chocolate cake which was super delicious. So all in all, it was a great trip to town. Em gave me the 2 books that she had on her shelves that she's recommended to me, so that was The Image of You and also The One We Fell in Love With, and then I had to nip into Waterstones to pick up the copy of The Immortalist, which I'm honestly so excited to read, even more so now that I've actually got my own copy, because I couldn't actually find it in Waterstones, so I had to go and ask one of the booksellers whether they had it in stock, and both her and the other person that was behind the counter sounded so excited about this book. They were both telling me how amazing it was, that they wanted it to be turned into a Netflix adaptation, and just basically raving about how amazing this story is. So that, paired with Em's recommendation of this book, has made me really excited to read it because it just sounds so interesting. So I'm just about to jump in the shower, and then I'm going to start reading, and I think because I'm so excited about it, I'm going to start with The Immortalists. I'll catch up with you if I've had any more thoughts on it once I start reading. Okay guys, so it's now about 9 o'clock on Sunday evening, but I have actually managed to make a pretty good start on The Immortalists. I'm about 75 pages in, and so far I can totally see why everyone seems to be giving this book such brilliant reviews, because it's absolutely just sucking me in right from the start. So the concept of this book, obviously you heard a little bit what Em said in my reaction to her like picking the book and recommending it for me, but basically it's about these 4 siblings who go to see this psychic who can apparently tell them the day that they're going to die, and then the book kind of follows them each in their own separate journeys and kind of like sort of looks at how that information, whether it's true or not, affects how they choose to live their lives. So we follow each of the siblings separately, and the one that we've started with is Simon, who is the youngest sibling, as he moves to San Francisco, and he kind of just following him along, him sort of trying to find an identity for himself and figure out what he wants to do with his life, because obviously as the youngest sibling he's always been kind of like babied and hasn't really necessarily had to deal with much much pressure, but at the same time hasn't had that much independence either. So we're kind of just following him along that bit to begin with, but we are not really too far into the story yet because the first section was kind of just sort of introducing the siblings as a unit, and now we're kind of into their individual stories, which is going to be really interesting. So far Simon's story is absolutely like so intriguing, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how it turns out, but I'm also looking forward to seeing the other siblings as well. So basically cannot wait to carry on reading this book, but I do need to be up early tomorrow morning for work, so I think I'm going to be finished reading now for this evening, but I'll probably try and get some squeezed in before I head out for work in the morning, so I'll of course keep you updated. Morning guys, so it's now Monday and I'm just checking in really quickly before work because I'm obviously running late, but I'm 100 pages into the Immortalist and I feel like this book just keeps getting better. I think what's really interesting to me is that obviously each of the siblings do feature in the other sections. I'm still only on Simon's section, but although we know all of the siblings have got their individual lives going on, each of the sections seems to just give you a real deep dive into one of their stories. So in Simon's section we're really just focusing on him and his life, and we don't find out too much more about what happens to the other siblings until like I guess we reach their section. So it's really interesting to see how it's kind of sort of just giving you a really individual perspective rather than focusing on all of them at once, which I think is super interesting and really allows you to get to know the characters on their own rather than just sort of knowing them as part of a sibling unit. So really enjoying it, and I'll be reading some more on my lunch break as well. So I'm now home from work and clearly I've just gotten straight back into my pyjamas because it's just one of those evenings I feel like where all I'm planning to do is pretty much just chill out and hopefully do quite a bit of reading. But on my lunch break at work I did manage to make it to just over 150 pages through the Immortalists, and honestly I'm just getting more and more obsessed with this book with every page that I read. It's incredible. So in the little bit that I read whilst I was on my lunch break, we transitioned from Simon's perspective, which I was talking about earlier and I absolutely loved, now into Clara's perspective, which I've only just started. But I have to say those are the two siblings so far that I'm the most interested in because I feel like those are the ones that we've had the most sort of like interaction with at this point in the story, and I also just really love their relationship with each other because it's a really just like lovely and wholesome sibling relationship. And I feel like sibling relationships and just family relationships in general are often overlooked in books because the sort of bigger focus is on like romances and friendships. So it's really nice to have a book that's kind of pretty much dedicated to siblings and sort of just looking into family relationships. In and amongst other things, those aren't the only relationships, but it is nice to see that have a bit more of a sort of predominant focus. But I have to say, as well as these more wholesome sort of explorations of family relationships, it also has really delved into some pretty dark issues, and it can be pretty like sort of graphic and a little bit sort of not gory as such, but just very full on at times. And so it's a very dark book but also has some lighter moments, but I think this author Chloe Benjamin has definitely not shied away from dealing with some really serious issues, but so far I'm finding that she's dealing with them so well, and just the whole story is just absolutely gripping me. So I can't wait to read more. I think I'm gonna have some dinner, watch some TV and then get to reading.
Hey darling, can I tell you what's been on my mind? Sick and tired of the 9 to 5 in the city life. Hey darling, we could get out of town, see the beautiful world around, wanna see it now. Pack our bags and get in that car, leave a little note and we'll drive real far. Let's get out, we can leave this city. Let's drive to the open air. Yeah, the countryside is so pretty, with the wind blowing in your hair. We can look back someday. Baby, don't you understand that we only get one life? I wanna make it count, honey. Come on now and take my hand. Hey darling, I love it when it's me and you on the road with a couple of tunes in a car for two.
So So it's now Thursday morning and this week just seems to be going really, really quickly, but I'm hoping to be able to finish reading The Immortalists today. That's upside down, obviously, classic me, but I'm hoping to be able to finish this book today. I'm under 100 pages now from the end. I think I've probably got about 65, 70 pages left to go. I'm now on to the final perspective for the final sibling, so it's Varia, and I think it's kind of interesting that you kind of go in like reverse order for the siblings. So Varia is the oldest, followed by Daniel, then Clara, and then Simon, but in terms of the perspectives that you get, you start with the youngest and then work your way up, and it's kind of interesting because you follow them across such a massive time span, and so it's just really interesting to see not only how the characters sort of develop, but also how the time that they're living in sort of changes as the book goes on. But I've kind of just started Varia's perspective, and I'm not sure how much I'll be able to read on my lunch break today because I've got a kind of crazy day at work, but I am hoping to finish this book this evening when I get home, so I'm really excited to see how it ends. Good morning, guys. So it's now Friday and I'm super happy to say that I did manage to finish my read of The Immortalists yesterday evening, and oh my god, all I can say is that this book was incredible. Picked such an amazing book, and I'm super glad that I started with this one just because I love this book so much, and I feel like it's the kind of book which has so much going on within it that I could definitely see myself coming back to it many times and just finding new things in it every single time, just because it's so rich with story and information and detail, which is the kind of book that I absolutely love just because I feel like there's just so much to get from it, and I absolutely loved the book so much. One of the things that gripped me so much about this story was that it had multiple perspectives, which is one of my favourite narrative styles just because I love that sort of ability to see different people and get different perspectives on the same topic. But then another thing which I think really added to that was the fact that it not only followed different perspectives but also took place over such a massive span of time. So the book started in the 60s and then went right through up until the mid-noughties, so you see a massive span of time, and we follow each of the siblings in different time points. So I think we follow Simon in the like 70s and 80s, and then we follow Varia at the end in the noughties, and so we have these siblings who are all obviously connected, but then their stories are so different and each influenced by one another, which is really interesting. And I just thought it was really cool to be able to not only sort of follow how the siblings change throughout the book depending on their lives, but also how the world in which they exist is also developing and changing constantly. So that was really interesting and I loved that about this story. Now, I will say that this book does deal with some really, really hard-hitting topics. There's everything in there from mental and physical illness to a lot of loss, homophobia, and lots of other things like that. So it is a really, really dark story at times and very hard-hitting. Chloe Benjamin really delves into these topics and she doesn't shy away from them. So of course, if those are things that you might find difficult to read about, that's something to be aware of. But for me, I feel like it really added to the story just because I feel like she gave so much attention to each of the topics that she dealt with and dealt with them all in a really, really effective way that I just found that they were really, really important to the story, and certainly sort of without those different sort of topics that she dealt with, it wouldn't have been the same story. So I really enjoyed it, but just something to be aware of that it is quite dark and difficult to read at times. Now, one of those topics that it deals with is OCD, and there is a quote that I picked out from the book which obviously deals with OCD because in the context of where it's placed in the story, it was specifically talking about one of the characters' experience with obsessive compulsive disorder. However, I just feel like it really spoke to the book in general and really for me summarised what I took away from it and what I feel like Chloe Benjamin was trying to achieve. So I thought I'd just read that out because it doesn't give away any spoilers, but I do feel like it really summarises my thoughts on the book. So it was on page 347 and it says, the reason she doesn't think that she'll be able to ever get rid of the disorder is that on some days she doesn't think it's a disorder. On some days she doesn't think it's absurd to believe that a thought can make something true. I just thought that was such an incredible and powerful passage because it really is for me what I took away from this story, because I think for the majority of the book what we're looking at is how prophecies work in terms of whether or not how we perceive things can affect how things actually turn up in reality. So it was really interesting, and it's something that I personally am really intrigued in just in life rather than just in fiction, because I just think it's really interesting to think about how powerful thoughts can be and how we perceive things has so much power to determine how things turn out. And so it was a really interesting way that this book kind of looked at how each of the siblings had a different kind of thought on that particular subject. So I loved this story so much, absolutely gave it 5 stars, cannot recommend it highly enough, and thank you so much for recommending it, Em, because I've enjoyed this book so much. So of course this isn't just an Immortalist reading vlog, even though I feel like I've been reading this for quite a few days now. So the next book I'm going to be picking up from the TBR that Em picked for me is The One We Fell in Love With by Paige Toon, which I feel like will be a little bit less of a dark story than The Immortalists, but it is kind of like a romance from what I gather, where maybe 3 sisters or friends, I can't remember what Em said, but basically 3 people have fallen in love with the same person, and so I feel like it's a romance with a bit of a darker twist. So hopefully I'll really enjoy it, and I'll be starting this one on my lunch break at work.
know we're gonna have a really good time, driving in the middle of the night when the stars are bright. Pack our bags and get in that car, leave a little note and we'll drive real far.
Hey guys, so it is now Saturday, which I'm super happy about because I feel like the work week this week was very busy and hectic, so I was super excited for the weekend. Now it's actually Saturday afternoon, I think it's pretty much just gone midday. Jay and I went out this morning quite early for a walk in the moors, which was lovely, but the weather took a bit of a turn, so I'm now super glad to be back in the car. But we've got about an hour or so drive back home now, and I'm just going to be doing some reading. I picked up the one we fell in love with yesterday on my lunch break at work, and I got about 100 pages in total. And so far I am really enjoying the story. It's an interesting one because it's about three triplets, obviously three triplets only come in threes, but basically it's triplets who each fell in love with the same boy, and that's kind of like as far as we got. But basically I'm really enjoying the story. It's interesting sort of getting to know all of the triplets and seeing how they're different from one another. And also for the drive home I've got this bag of Dozy and Dam vegan Smarties, which I've seen like quite a few people talk about on Instagram recently, and I'm super excited to give them a try because vegan Smarties is something that I totally want in my life. So clearly I'm back home and we managed to make it back after our walk, but the drive was actually really useful because I managed to do quite a bit of reading. It was so cozy in the car, which was actually ideal for reading, and I managed to make it to about halfway through the one we fell in love with, which I'm really glad about because this is a book that I expected to be quite easy to get through, and it's absolutely living up to that expectation because I'm just definitely flying through it. I'm hoping to be able to finish it today actually because it just is really easy to read, and I'm finding the story to be like really interesting. One of the things that this book is about obviously is basically these three triplets who have fallen in love with the same guy over the years, and this guy is kind of like still in all of their lives in some capacity or another. And I think it's kind of interesting because we sort of follow them along and sort of see all of their various relationships, like both romantically and platonically right throughout the book. The one thing is though that the book goes between two timelines, which is like the sort of past timeline where one of these sisters is dating him, and then the present timeline where things are slightly different, but it doesn't really make it clear sometimes when there's been a swap between the two timelines, and so it can be a little bit confusing. Like, it's not super difficult, but I just think it could have been slightly clearer when the timelines are changing. Like in some books where they have those multiple timelines, they often like start each chapter by saying that it's like which year it's in, which I think is quite helpful because in this one we've not only got different timelines but also three different perspectives from each of the triplets, so it can be a little bit sort of difficult to keep up, but overall it's not too tricky and I am definitely enjoying the book. So now that we're home I'm just going to jump in the shower, get cozy, and then I will start reading some more of the book, I think.
Let's get out, we can leave this city. Let's drive to the open air. Yeah, the countryside is so pretty with the wind blowing in your hair. We can look back someday, baby, don't you understand that we only get one life? I wanna make it count, honey, come on now and take my hand. Let's get out, we can leave this city. Let's drive to the open air. Yeah, the countryside is so pretty with the wind blowing in your hair. We can look back someday, baby, don't you understand that we only get one life? I wanna make it count, honey, come on now and take my hand. Yeah, we only get one life. I wanna make it count, honey, come on now and take my hand.
So it's a little while later now, I've just been chilling on the sofa and I just finished up reading the one we fell in love with, which I actually really enjoyed. As I expected, this was quite a fast book to get through, but it was actually quite a surprising read for me because I went into it thinking it was just going to be like a standard romance, and it was interesting in that respect. Like, it started out like that and I was still enjoying it because it was just fun and light-hearted, but then just after halfway through, basically as soon as I started reading once we were back from the walk, it took a twist which I absolutely was not expecting, expecting, and it was really, really interesting because I feel like that twist took it from just an enjoyable book up to like another level, and it just made it even more interesting, just because I think when it comes to romance books I don't necessarily expect like a twist because it's not a thriller or anything like that, and I wasn't going into it expecting to be super surprised by the story, but it actually ended up being even more interesting and had a little bit more depth than I was expecting. So I really, really enjoyed that one, and I'm super glad to have finished it. I don't think it was quite a 5-star read for me, but it was probably definitely a 4-star one. I definitely enjoyed the book and the story and just thought it was a fun, light-hearted romance but with a little bit extra in it as well, which I really enjoyed. So another good pick from M. Now I am going to take a little bit of a break from reading and probably have some dinner and maybe watch a film, do some editing and things like that, but I will be starting my third book from M's TBR for me, so the final book for this reading vlog, later on this evening, and that book is The Image of You by Adele Parks, which is the thriller that Em picked out for me. And funnily enough, just from reading the blurb of this book, obviously I just read one book which featured triplets, and this book is a thriller about twins, so that's kind of funny just because, you know, it's probably not going to be much other similarities between the two books given that one is a romance and the other one is a thriller, but it is kind of funny that there is that similarity between them. So I am looking forward to getting into this one later, but for now it's time for dinner.
Child, I know you're hurt and you can't let go. It's not your fault and you don't deserve all the bad and the hurt. I know you tried so hard. I know you've done your part. It's not fair. You did your time. How much longer will you suffer in this life? But don't give up. Just hold on tight. It'll be alright. Your life you've tried to be a good man inside, did everything that you thought you should, didn't seem to do you any good.
So I've actually had quite a busy Sunday, so I've only managed to find some time to do some reading this afternoon, but I am now about 100 pages into The Image of You, and I have to say this book is taking me slightly longer to get into than I expected, definitely longer to get into than the other two books that I've picked up during this little like readathon week, but basically I'm just like only now getting into the story now that I'm about 100 pages in. I feel like because this is a book that's got quite a few perspectives, it does take you a little longer to set up the characters and kind of get into the swing of the story, but now that I've reached page 100 I feel like I am finally sort of into the story a little bit more. However, there are some bits about this story that I'm finding just a little bit more difficult to get into, and I'm not really vibing with the writing style as well, just because at times I'm finding it to be really overly formal, which just like is kind of a bit jarring and I'm not necessarily loving. It is getting like easier to get through the more pages that I read just because like I guess I'm getting used to the writing style, but at the beginning it definitely was sticking out to me as being very like formal, which was weird because it's a contemporary thriller, so I wasn't quite sure why the formal writing style was being used. But anyway, kind of getting used to that. And then the other thing that's kind of stuck out to me about this book is that it's about these twins, Anna and Zoe, and it's kind of about like their, well, one of them, Anna, is kind of like online dating and she meets this guy Nick, and it's kind of about a thriller that sort of sets around that romance, I think is what I'm gathering from the story so far. But it's kind of set up where you've got these two twins who are very different from one another, and I feel like the author has maybe tried slightly too hard to do that trope where you've got this one twin who's like really nice and innocent and is like the sweet likable one, but maybe that she's slightly naive, and then you've got this more experienced and slightly more hardened and just like not as friendly one, and you've got these two very different characters who have a very like sort of close bond with one another, but they're so different. And I feel like at the beginning of the book the author was maybe putting a little bit too much emphasis on creating that trope of these very different but super connected twins, but I feel like now that we're getting a little bit more into the story, there's a little bit less emphasis on that. So yeah, hopefully I will get into it and enjoy the characters a little bit more, but for the beginning 100 pages it definitely has been a little bit more of a struggle to read, so we'll see how I get on for the rest of the evening.
I know you've tried so hard. I know you've done your part. It's not fair. You did your time. How much longer will you suffer in this life? But don't give up. Just hold on tight. It'll be alright. I know you tried so hard. I know you've done your part. It's not fair. You did your time. How much longer will you suffer in this life? But don't give up. Just hold on tight. It'll be alright.
So it's a little while later now, and I'm now about 175 pages into The Image of You, and I have to say it's kind of a weird one for me because obviously I know it's a thriller, but so far, like a little under halfway into the book now, it doesn't necessarily feel like a thriller. I feel like I'm very alert to looking out for any clues for what might be coming, but so far it kind of seems more like a romance with a little bit of family drama thrown in, but there's nothing in there that really indicates a thriller just yet. However, I was just messaging Em about my thoughts on this book because obviously she was the one that recommended it to me, and she said that I have to message her as soon as the twist comes up because she said that the twist is basically one of the best twists that she's read in a long time. So although I'm not noticing any like major thrillery parts just yet, I am super excited to carry on reading and see what happens, just because I love a good twist. Like, come on, like who doesn't love a good twist? However, it is Sunday evening and I think I'm actually going to stop reading now and go to sleep because obviously I have to be up early for work in the morning, so I'm really looking forward to picking this one up again tomorrow. And I know it might be slightly ambitious given that it is a work day, but I am hoping to maybe be able to finish this one tomorrow, so we'll see how that goes. So it's just after 8:30 and I just finished up reading The Image of You, and Em was definitely not lying when she said that this book had a mega twist, because it definitely took me by surprise. Obviously it's a thriller and I definitely don't want to say too much because the twist and the surprise of it is definitely what makes the book most enjoyable, particularly because I feel like, as I said, this book got off to a little bit of a slow start, but knowing that there was like a good twist coming definitely kept me hooked, and the book definitely picked up pace the more that I got through it, and then that twist was just like the cherry on top of the cake in terms of making it a really good thriller. So I definitely recommend reading this one. Even though it took a little while to get into, it was definitely worth it in the end, and I'm going to give this one 4 stars. It was kind of an interesting read for me because aside from the slow start, what I found interesting about this book was the fact that none of the characters who you focus on were very likeable or even very relatable, for me anyway, and yet somehow they were super compelling. And I think in a way it was more of a like morbid curiosity curiosity thing that makes these characters, who are very unlikable, still so compelling. But yeah, I just absolutely loved it, and in the end it ended up being a brilliant thriller. So that obviously brings me to the end of the little TBR that Em set up for me, and honestly I've had such a fun time reading these books that I really knew very much like nothing about going into, but then they all ended up being really enjoyable for me, particularly thinking about obviously The Image of You and also The One We Fell in Love With. I feel like both of these books had some really brilliant twists in them, which I really enjoyed, and when it came to The One We Fell in Love With, the fact that there were twists kind of surprised me because it wasn't what I was thinking I was going to get from a romance, so that was a really good surprise. And then yeah, The Image of You definitely ended up being a much better thriller than I thought it was going to be at the beginning, so 2 4-star reads. But clearly the definite winner from this little TBR has to be The Immortalist by Chloe Benjamin, which was like pretty much an instant 5-star read for me. As soon as I was reading Simon's perspective, which is the first one you get, I knew I was going to love this whole book, and just the way that it delved into that sort of conversation between like reality and prophecy and manifestation, in and amongst all of the other amazing topics that it sort of talks about right throughout. I just thought this book was so well written. All of the characters were just so compelling. It was super vivid, and honestly I just loved the book so much and can't wait to read more of Chloe Benjamin's stuff, because this book was just next level, honestly. Like, not only is this the favourite book that I picked up in this little reading vlog TBR thing, but also I just think this is going to be like a long time favourite of mine because it was just so incredible. So yeah, those are the 3 books that I picked up thanks to Em, and honestly, if you're watching Em, which I assume you probably are, thank you so much for picking so many great books, because these 3 books were all really brilliant, but they were all ones that I hadn't really heard too much about. In fact, 2 of them, aside from The Immortalist, I hadn't heard of at all, and so I would have probably never picked up these books. They weren't really on my radar, but I ended up enjoying all of them so much, and honestly it was just really fun to go into a TBR where I didn't really know much about the books I was going to be reading, but I ended up loving them all. So I hope you've enjoyed hearing all of my thoughts on these books, and if you've read any of them, do let me know your thoughts on them as well, because I'd love to chat about these books with anyone who's read them. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.